Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over Major Hurricane Ida. Currently it's about Category 1 status, but over the next couple of hours and days we're expecting this to become a Category 2, then a Category 3, and potentially even up near Category 4 status before it makes landfall in Louisiana. After it makes landfall, it's expected to stay over that area and move inland, bringing even more rainfall to areas like the Tennessee Valley and the Appalachians. So we're going to be covering all of that and more in today's video. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll be responding within a couple of hours of you posting them. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have 4 disturbances. We have Invest 97L, which is up in the north central Atlantic, and that has a 60% chance of developing within the next 2 and 5 days. So a fairly decent shot that this develops, but it is out to sea, so we're not expecting any real impacts on land. We have Disturbance 2, which is just west of Africa, that has a 50% chance of developing within the next 5 days. Then we have Tropical Depression 10, which used to be Invest 98L. It's now upgraded to a tropical depression, expected to become our next tropical storm, but luckily that's heading to the north out over the open water, so we're not expecting any land impacts. It may curve up near Bermuda, although we're not certain about that. And then we have, of course, Hurricane Ida, which is sitting up there into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected to make landfall into Louisiana over the next couple of hours and days. Let's start off with Disturbance 2. It's located at approximately 18 degrees north by 34 degrees west. Maximum winds somewhere between 17 and 23 miles per hour. And we don't know the current minimum pressure of this wave. You can see it's currently right over the western coast of Africa. And it's going to be making its way to near the Cape Verde Islands before eventually curving up a little bit further to the northwest and the northeast. That storm doesn't look like it'll have too much juice as of right now, but potentially as it moves over that central Atlantic area, it might start to develop a little bit better. We're not certain on a track for this system just yet, although we do have a lot of time for this storm before it impacts anywhere on land, because of course it's going over the open Atlantic waters. Taking a look at Invest 97L, that's the one in the northern Atlantic. This one is located at 32.3 degrees north by 51.6 degrees west. Maximum winds of about 29 miles per hour. Minimum pressure about 1,012 millibars. We don't know the movement speed of this one either just yet. You can see it is a fairly well-developed storm. There is some convection, especially on the eastern side of the system. But this one is also out to sea over open waters. No real land impact. So this one isn't going to be too big of a deal either. Tropical Depression 10, this one could curve up into Bermuda. So I have the National Hurricane Center's forecast in the top left-hand side of the screen. Again, here's Bermuda right here, and you can see how it's curving up to that area. So it would not surprise me if it made its way near Bermuda. It would be a tropical depression or a tropical storm by that point, so it would not be anything too strong. You can see that it is expected to become a tropical storm, so this will probably become our next named storm. It'll at least take off another name off the list. Right now it's still just Tropical Depression 10, located at 14.8 degrees north by 50.1 degrees west. Maximum winds of about 35 miles per hour. Minimum pressure of 1,007 millibars, moving north at 8 miles per hour. Here's a look at Hurricane Ida, which is the big one that we want to focus on. You can see a little bit of an eye right in the center of that of the storm right here. So it is starting to strengthen into what you would see as more of a classical type of hurricane, where you're starting to get that eye wall to form. And that's the area where we have the strongest winds, and it's actually starting to pop up on the satellite imagery. You can see that's a fairly big storm, so even if the center of the storm, let's say, tracks into southeastern Louisiana, you're going to have impacts that are going to move anywhere from central and western Louisiana all the way to about Mississippi and Alabama. So it's a fairly wide storm. So even, again, if it's not making direct landfall with your area, it'll probably still have some impacts. Located at 24.8 degrees north by 86.1 degrees west. Maximum winds 85 miles per hour. Minimum pressure 984 millibars, moving northwest at about 16 miles per hour. So this one is still a Category 1 storm, although it's approaching that Category 2 status. Here's a look at the key messages for Hurricane Ida. First one says there's a danger of life-threatening storm surge inundation Sunday along the coast of Louisiana and Mississippi within the storm surge warning area. Extremely life-threatening inundation of 9 feet or greater above ground level is possible somewhere within the area from Morgan City, Louisiana to the coast of Mississippi. Overtopping of local levees outside of the hurricane and storm damage risk reduction system is possible where local inundation values may be higher. Interest throughout the warning area should follow any advice given by local officials. Second one says Ida is expected to be an extremely dangerous major hurricane when it reaches the coast of Louisiana. Hurricane force winds are expected Sunday in portions of the hurricane warning area along the Louisiana coast, including the metropolitan New Orleans area, with potentially catastrophic wind damage possible where the core of Ida moves onshore. Actions to protect life and property should be rushed to completion today in the warning area. This is probably your last day to make any final preparations for the storm. You may still have some time tomorrow, but it's going to be very tight. You want to probably do most of your preparations if you need to evacuate today if you live in that southeastern Louisiana area or if you live in southern Mississippi, because it looks like there will at least be some damaging winds over those areas, and then also storm surge and heavy rainfall added on that. Third one says Ida is likely to produce heavy rainfall Sunday and Monday across the central Gulf Coast from the south from southeast Louisiana to coastal Mississippi, resulting in life-threatening flash and urban flooding and significant river flooding impacts as well. As Ida moves inland, significant flooding impacts are likely across portions of the lower Mississippi and Tennessee valleys Monday and Tuesday. So that's the key messages from the National Hurricane Center. If we take a look at the track from the Hurricane Center, you can see it's currently expected to become at least a Category 3 cyclone. And I believe if you were to look at their wind forecast, they would have winds up to Category 4 status. The M, that stands for major hurricane, which they classify as a Category 3, 4, or 5 storm. So we're expecting it to achieve that major hurricane status later today, maybe tomorrow morning. And then it makes a landfall sometime around Sunday night. You're going to have some impacts even before there, even by the afternoon hours, but it will make landfall around Sunday night. Then by Monday, it's inland. Tuesday, it's in the Tennessee Valley. Wednesday, still in the Tennessee Valley, and moving out into the central Appalachians by Thursday, where we're going to have basically a stripe of rainfall all within this area that could reach 2 to 4 inches or even higher. If we look at the watches and warnings, you can see that we have some hurricane warnings as well as storm surge warnings up for parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. For western Louisiana, we have a few tropical storm warnings as well as for the coastal parts of Mississippi and Alabama as of right now. And then here you can see the wind field of this system. So you can see how this is a fairly big wind field. It's approximately this size, even a little bit bigger. So the wind field of the storm is going to be quite large, and that is going to mean that even if it makes landfall, let's say it makes landfall right here where that M is, you would have impacts from tropical storm force winds that would extend all throughout that area. So this is going to be a wide storm that is going to have impacts far away from that center of the storm, although of course the strongest winds will be right around the center of the system. Looking at the track, from the models, you can see that most of them have this going into eastern Louisiana and then eventually curving up into the Tennessee Valley. And then once it heads into this area right here, there's a little bit more confusion on the track. Does this curve up a little bit further north like this, or does it stay and just kind of slide out to the south? That'll have some implications in the form of rainfall, but if we're looking at anything in terms of tropical impacts, basically you would have to be near the coastal part of the Gulf of Mexico to actually get any impacts tropically from the storm. But we're not looking at anything tropical once you get inland, mostly just a rain event from these areas that once you go inland. Taking a look at some of the models and what they're showing for the track of the storm and where it's making landfall, you can see the GFS model puts it right in there. If we look at the next model, which is the Canadian model, you can see that one's a little bit further to the east, and we're just going to plot these out because you can see you can kind of form a trend and get a general consensus of where most of these models are putting it. The European model a little bit further west of the GFS, and then if we also look at the NAM 12km model, you can see that one puts it into parts of central Louisiana as well. So you can see these are mainly clustered into eastern Louisiana as of right now. And even if you look at the German icon model, that one's also into eastern Louisiana. So we're pretty certain that somewhere along this coastal bend of Louisiana is where we're going to have the main landfall. But again, the impacts will be far wider than the actual landfall spot. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, you can see that we're currently at that high-end Category 1 status, basically almost into Category 2, if not already at low-end Category 2. I think we're actually at low-end Category 2 status, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, we're nearing that Category 2 status. We're moving up in the intensity, and you can see that we're still expecting this to become a Category 3. Now, the models yesterday, if you were to look at these yesterday, only had this up to a Category 2. We're now expecting this to be at least a Category 3, if not a Category 4. I'm expecting it to be somewhere up near here, high-end Category 3, low-end Category 4. The model guidance has been on the lower end of things in terms of the intensity, so I think it'll probably be stronger than that. Most of these storms do outperform by a few miles per hour, so I think it'll be a little bit stronger than what's being indicated here. But at that point, it really doesn't matter. We're looking at 110 miles per hour or 120 miles per hour. It really is not going to make too big of a difference. It still will be destructive. And again, main impacts I think are not actually going to be the winds. I'm expecting the main impacts to be the flooding and storm surge from this. Here's the shot of getting 96 knot winds or higher, which is right around Category 3 strength. So you can see that we're up there. We're up near a 40 to 60% chance within this entire area right here. And so those areas are where we're expecting it to be, and this would actually be, I believe, Category 2 strength. So 96 knots, that's around 100 to 110 miles per hour, so very strong winds at that point. You can see that we do have some parts right along the coastal part of Louisiana that could be dealing with that. Again, the winds are not going to extend too far inland. Once you get inland, you're looking at mainly Category 2 or Category 1 strength winds. Still strong, but again, the main impacts, I think, will be rain and storm surge. Speaking of the storm surge, here's the map from the National Hurricane Center. 2 to 4 feet along coastal Alabama. Once you get into coastal Mississippi, this is where we're looking at about 4 to 7 feet in eastern Mississippi, 7 to 11 feet along the rest of the Mississippi coast into southeastern Louisiana on the east-facing areas, over Lake Pontchartrain and areas around New Orleans. This is where we're looking at about 3 to 5 feet or 4 to 7 feet. Storm surge inundation, 10 to 15 feet, which is the highest here over southeastern Louisiana in the marshlands over there, where we have some of the swampy areas. This is where we're dealing with 10 to 15 feet of storm surge inundation, which is going to be a real issue. This is a very flat area, and at times it dips below sea level in a lot of these spots. So you, of course, have the levees over some areas near New Orleans and the main city area, but once you get away from there, you don't have levees over the entire area. So if you live outside of the levee area, I would say that you want to probably get out by today, because you're probably gonna have at least some flooding, whether that be minor or major. Especially if you live within here, this area especially, you're gonna be dealing with storm surge added on with some of the heaviest rainfall. 6 to 9 feet between Morgan City and Intracoastal City, and then we have 3 to 5 feet from Intracoastal City to Pecan Island, and then we have 1 to 3 feet for western Louisiana as well. So you're seeing a fairly high amount, especially concentrated within the southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi area. Looking at the total rainfall from this event, 1 to 2 inches in the light green, 2 to 4 inches in the dark green, 4 to 6 inches in the yellows, 6 to 10 in the oranges, 10 to 15 in the reds, and 15 to 20 inches once you get into that pink color. So you can see that we're dealing with heavy rainfall is stretching fairly far inland, 6 to 10 inches in that orange color. And then you're looking at, even in southeastern Louisiana, 10 plus inches, even some areas nearing 15 inches of rainfall. That is a ton, and you're adding that on to what would amount to about 6 to 10 feet of storm surge as well. So that's added on to all that storm surge, all the rainfall. Once you add that together, that's going to be a ton of water that's just standing up there. So this will be definitely dangerous for the flooding, especially, and again, especially for outside of the levee areas that aren't protected by that levee system. Taking a look at the flash flooding chances, we have a 50% chance or higher within that high risk zone in the pink, which is over southeastern Louisiana. Even inland areas have a shot of seeing some flash flooding as well across parts of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida. Taking a look at the current aircraft recon, they sent in the NOAA aircraft into the storm. You can see that they found the strongest winds, especially on that eastern pass, where they had winds up near that high tropical storm status to even Category 1 status. So fairly high up there in terms of the wind speeds. You can also see on the right hand side of your screen what the actual flight level winds were. So you can see they did peak out around 60 knots or higher in a few of those spots. They even peaked out near 64, 65 knots, which would be that Category 1 status in some of the aircraft recon data. Taking a look at the sounding, this is from the GFS model, and I took a sounding of the storm as it was approaching the Louisiana coastline in the central Gulf of Mexico. You do have a little bit of wind shear, so the wind shear amounts did go up a little bit from yesterday. So you can see that originally the winds are coming out of the west. They then start to tilt a little bit more out of the northwest, and then eventually out of the north as you go up a little bit. So that might help to break up the system just a little bit, which is good news, but I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact on the storm, especially considering that the wind speeds at this level aren't exactly too high. So we're not looking at winds that are really that strong at this point, so it's not going to have too big of an impact. It's not going to really tilt the storm all that much. It will have some impact though, and it's good to see that at least we have more wind shear than yesterday. Yesterday it was pretty much all straight, where you had these lines facing in pretty much the exact same direction, which is not what you want to see. And that would indicate that the storm is stacked upon itself, and that could lead to more intensification. At least right now we have a little bit of a shift higher up in the atmosphere from what we see lower down in the atmosphere. Taking a look at the current surface map of this, and this is as it's heading into the eastern and central Gulf of Mexico. You can see that the winds coming in from the Caribbean flowing on top of the storm and then eventually feeding into the center of the storm. I pointed this out yesterday, but I'll say it again for those of you who didn't watch that video. These storms this year have really had a tendency to see the flow of moisture come out of the east, then kind of just flow over them, and then have another stream that does also move in the same direction pretty much, and kind of moves just to the south of it, kind of enclosing the low pressure, but you're not dealing with any moisture feeding into the storm except for on the northern and eastern side. So that's usually the area where we're dealing with the most intensification, and that's still the case with this storm, but not to as great of an extent, because now what we see is that you have the moisture being pulled in from the Caribbean. It's moving up to the northeast, and then eventually you can see those wind barbs curl in upon the storm. So you still have somewhat of a southern stream, but what's happening is that you have another area, another little disturbance to the west of the storm that's breaking up that southern flow. And now what we have is that this is going over the storm and then eventually wrapping inside the storm. So that is helping to kind of bring a little bit more moisture into the storm. It's also going to slightly slow down upon approach, because you have a little bit of a high pressure up to the northeast. So that high pressure will help to slow down the system as it's moving towards the Louisiana coast, unfortunately. So that may cause a few more issues with flooding. Taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, you can see that we have a little bit of a warm eddy in through the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and then especially along that Louisiana coastline. But if we're looking at the track of the system, it would be somewhere around here, and you can see there's a little bit of a stripe of warmer waters in through there. That's around 89, 88 degrees Fahrenheit, even up near the 90s in a few of those spots, especially as you're getting around the Louisiana coast, where you're definitely dealing with temperatures, sea surface temperatures getting up above 90. But even if we look in the open Gulf of Mexico, you have really warm waters in those areas. You have that little cooler stripe where Hurricane Grace went through, which upwelled some cooler water. But other than that, the rest of this area is looking fairly good in terms of the water temperatures, which is a bad sign. That means it does have the chance to intensify even more. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. So if you did enjoy that, please consider leaving a like and turning on notifications so you never miss another one of these videos. I upload daily, so again, make sure you have those notifications turned on. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.